In earlier times, people thought that the only way to force others into submission was through physical violence and brutality. Men used tyranny to get what they wanted, while women were treated as objects. Women would only be pursued for sex, and if they gave in, the men would leave right after, and if they did not, the men simply forced them into it, or looked elsewhere. The suffering and injustice of it all prompted women to think of a way to turn things around. They did not have the physical strength nor the means to overpower men, so they used the art of seduction instead. Powerful women throughout history have used this method to get men to do what they want. Helen of Troy, his she, and the most famous of them all, Cleopatra, are prime examples. These women would spend great care in making themselves attractive to men. Once the men are enticed, they would play hard to get, showing only glimpses of flesh or allowing fleeting touches of the skin, just enough to keep men wanting more. This effectively piques the man's interest and desire, where the need to possess the woman becomes more important, for they now view the woman as a fantasy. Once the men are hooked, the women will distract them by taking them to places of luxury and pleasure. As they immerse themselves in these pleasures, they will fall in love. And then, just as suddenly, the women will become aloof and distant, making the men confused. Thus, they begin the pursuit once more to regain the women's favor, making them weak and emotional. Great men who have conquered vast lands and have built large armies, such as Julius Caesar, Trojan Paris, and Mark Antony, have found themselves becoming slaves to the charms of these women. Men, however, underestimated the power of seduction, and even though they acknowledged the cleverness of it, did not deem it important until the 17th century. Here, the men begin to recognize its true power, and thus used it for gain. They used charisma and words to lure women and men into doing what they wanted. The seduction methods used by men evolved throughout the years, with Napoleon using captivating oratory and theatrical devices to create grand spectacles. People who have mastered the art of seduction have found that making people fall in love with them is the most intoxicating power one can ever have on someone else. This is because the person who has fallen in love suddenly gets a powerful desire to make the object of their affection happy, making them heed their loved one's desires without them even asking for it. Seduction not only works in love, but in social situations as well. Even in modern times, seduction can be used in the workplace, where people plan and strategize to learn about people's weaknesses and to use them to their advantage. Seducers are never self-absorbed. Instead, they focus on their target, getting into their skin, putting themselves in the person's shoes, learning what makes them tick and what makes them vulnerable. All this information is valuable to the seducer, for they use this to captivate their target. The Art of Seduction is a guide on how one can effectively charm and persuade people to do what they want. It explores two parts: the seducer, who delves into identifying the attributes that can attract people and how to make the most out of them, and the anti-seducer, who shows how to break down people's defenses and have them surrender. The seductive character. People inherently have qualities that attract other people, and the aim is to determine which ones they are. Also, one should be careful not to approach with their intentions so obvious, as this will work against them. The key is to seemingly naturally captivate people's attention and interest. There are 9 seducer types who have different qualities and exude different energies. By learning about each one of them, one can be able to identify which part of themselves they most relate to. The book will guide us to how to further develop and embrace these traits and use them to seduce other people. The Siren. The Siren is the ultimate fantasy of every man, as the method to lure them is mostly dependent on the physical attributes of the woman. However, it is not just the beauty that captivates them, but the confidence and the sensuality they seem to exude. The spectacular Siren. The perfect example of the spectacular Siren was Cleopatra. After having been exiled by her brother at a young age, she came to Julius Caesar, who was visiting Egypt at the time, half-clothed. Caesar was awestruck by her beauty, her confidence, and her daring for coming all the way to Egypt, with only one man to keep her protected. She became Caesar's lover and would arrange theatrical events, undergoing transformations using makeup, but maintaining her goddess-like beauty each time. One never knew what she would do next, and Caesar fell under her spell. Cleopatra lured him away from warfare, and instead showed him pleasures and luxury. Then she would become hard and angry, and Caesar would go crazy trying to regain her favor. He even came up with excuses to stay in Egypt, and it was during this time that Rome fell into turmoil. Caesar was killed, and one of the new rulers that emerged was Mark Antony. Cleopatra asked for an audience with him, and she arrived in magnificence, embodying Aphrodite herself, and Mark Antony was spellbound. Cleopatra not only used her beauty, but also a theatrical streak to keep men's attention. She knew that men can easily get bored or distracted. Hence, she created various illusions and distractions to keep them captivated. And it was found that once men are hooked, they will follow, even if it means the end of them. The Sex Siren. Marilyn Monroe captivated men's hearts all over the world. She grew up in an orphanage and was astonished by the effect she had on men when one day she tore her blouse accidentally and had to wear a small, tight sweater. She grew up aspiring to be an actress, and when she was cast in the movie Love Happy, men fell in love with her. She was mesmerizing, reeking of sex, but at the same time, unconscious of it, which made the men fall all the more for her. She stirred feelings in them, making them desire to protect her. The sex siren is a provocative, sexually arousing woman, but whose charm would be the air of innocence and naivety that surrounded her. Keys to the character. The siren is often dubbed as the Aphrodite, and they attract men through their physical beauty. They enhance it to make themselves more irresistible. But the beauty does not make a siren. It is in the way she carries herself, with quiet confidence, and inviting smile and provocative gestures. She doesn't just give her body, she utilizes it to give men a taste of pure pleasure, and then holds back just enough to make them desperate for more. Sirens give a feeling of elusiveness that makes a man want to possess her, and then go mad for failing to do so. Hence, they pursue with more vigor, and they do so on their own initiative. The notion of a challenge and even danger is appealing to men nowadays because they have no other outlet to channel their passion and aggressiveness, like men did in older times, with war and hunting. The most important thing to note with embodying the siren is to ensure that the voice is sweet and low, seductive. Sirens also need to pay attention to their body and the way they dress. The whole ensemble must be enticing, and the movement needs to be graceful. Dangers. Sirens, unfortunately, become the object of feminine envy, and as such are often viewed as easy. Cleopatra sparked controversy and hatred from the more conservative women. However, sirens need to learn to ignore the rumors and the envy, and should accept that their power lies in their effect on men. Also, sirens must also learn to hold men's attention without the use of her physical beauty, eventually, such as intellect, because in time, the beauty will fade. The Rake. The Rake is a man well-versed in attracting females. He knows them thoroughly and indulges in what they want. As long as he is interested, he will devote his entire self to her. However, he cannot be tied down. His love for women is too strong. His fleeting attention is usually what captivates women, and the sense of danger he brings. The ardent rake. The ardent rake is a man who braves all to be with the woman he desires. Such a man was Duke Richelieu, who was both charming and ceaseless in pursuit. The ladies found him amusing, and he revelled in their attentions. The Duke was infamous for conquering women after women, despite their father or husband's best efforts to protect them. The more difficult the barriers were to get to a woman, the more he desired her, and thus he made all efforts to reach his goal. In those days, women fought over him, and even dueled for his affections. If the Duke did not pursue a woman, she was considered undesirable. The men had claimed that the Duke's charms and abilities were sorcery, for the women voluntarily fell at his feet. The ardent rake knows a way to the woman's heart, and despite being disloyal and amoral, is easily forgiven. Despite their best judgment, women fall for ardent rakes for his persistence. They get the notion that since he has braved adversaries to be with them, then it must mean that he loved them. The steely determination with which an ardent rake works makes women desire him in return. The demonic rake. The demonic rake is someone who uses words to persuade, to flatter, and to enchant, and this is precisely what Gabriele D'Annunzio became famous for. He was not easy to look at, being short and stocky, and having slightly bulging eyes. Men had no problem introducing him to their wives or sisters because of his physical appearance. While he did not possess physical beauty, women fell in love with him all the same. D'Annunzio captivated women's hearts through words. There was a beautiful lilt to his voice, and he spoke with such eloquence and passion that it made women's hearts flutter. His conquests spread far and wide, and people soon began replicating his work. He could move people with his words, and it was just not with women, but the men as well. D'Annunzio became a political figure in Italy, and people were mesmerized when he spoke. D'Annunzio is viewed as the demonic rake because he could enchant and make people unwittingly succumb to his charms. He could make people act with the power of his voice and words alone, just like how the snake tempted Eve to eat the forbidden apple in the Garden of Eden. Keys to the character. Rakes may be dishonest and disloyal, but there is no denying that they can be very persuasive in wooing the women they desire. The rake does not merely conquer women, but touches something in their unconscious, liberating thoughts that they have suppressed. A rake must also be willing to surrender to the moment. He should not hold himself back when pursuing a woman or pleasuring her. Seeing a rake unable to control himself is a weakness that women revel in. It makes them feel powerful, which only heightens their desire for the rake. Women are drawn to rakes because they stir in them the desire to tame them. They begin to hope that they could be the one to change him someday. The greatest weapon of the rake is his reputation. His reputation is what attracts the women. It is what draws them to him like a moth to a flame. Therefore, the rake should find ways to keep and enhance it. Dangers. Sirens and rakes face the same enemy, which is envy by people of the same sex. For rakes, it is not the enraged fathers that they should keep an eye for, but the envious ones who desire to be like them. As such, the only way to maintain their reputation is to continue as they are. The ideal lover. The ideal lover seduces people by creating an illusion and becoming the fantasy that people desire. The romantic ideal. Casanova is one of the greatest seducers that ever lived, and is the best example of the romantic ideal lover. This is because he studied the women he liked, found out what they desired, or what was missing in their lives, and would then assume that fantasy. One woman he seduced was married to a boring middle-aged man. She longed for excitement and adventure, and Casanova offered her exactly that. Being an ideal lover is quite difficult because it takes a lot of patience. It requires time and an attention to detail to learn about a person's life and identify what it is they yearn for. The beauty ideal. The beauty ideal plays on the notion that in order to effectively seduce someone, one must need to understand what the other person's weaknesses are. King Louis XV was known to be attracted to young, beautiful women, but he tired of them soon enough. He was a king, and therefore could get whatever he wanted, which meant he was always looking for something to fulfill him. Madame Pompadour had observed the king for quite some time, and she realized that he had an inferiority complex. With this knowledge, she made him believe that he could be greater than who he was. She made him feel elevated, that he was capable of greatness, and this was what drew him to Madame Pompadour. Keys to the character. To be an ideal lover, one must be able to observe. The key is to look beyond the obvious and listen to the words unsaid. The ideal lover's attention to detail, the patience, and the tentativeness appeal to many because they make it appear that their intentions is aesthetic love and devotion, and not just sex. The ideal lovers are seducers who express faith on the untapped potential of people, just like how Talleyrand seduced Napoleon into claiming himself an emperor. Ideal lovers have the ability to seduce many people, and thus can be used as a form of seduction in the social and political world. Dangers. Since ideal lovers create illusions and assume the fantasies of people, their biggest enemy is reality. The illusion is broken when the less appealing parts of one's self is revealed. Thus, the way to maintain the illusion is to keep a distance when reality starts to creep in. The dandy. The dandy breaks away from the gender roles that society has imposed on people and uses their femininity and masculinity to disarm and seduce others. The feminine dandy. The feminine dandy is a male who gets in touch with his softer feminine side to seduce women, but never failing to retain his masculine self. They take great care of their appearance, even sometimes adopting subtle female styles into their ensemble. They seduce women by making her comfortable enough to let her guard down, and once she is hooked, he swoops in with his masculine side and conquers her. The feminine dandy has the potential to attract numerous people and, hence, can be used in political and social situations as well. The masculine dandy. The masculine dandy is somewhat like the feminine dandy. One example of a masculine dandy was Lou von Salome. She was very pretty, but also very intellectual. She was well read, and back in the day it was a rare thing for a woman to be so. She captivated men with her opinions and her knowledge. However, she firmly declined men's proposals for marriage, revealing a rebellious, independent streak. She detested men who became too needy. These attributes made her seemingly masculine, and it was what enthralled the men who had died broken-hearted because of her. Keys to the character. Dandies are often admired for being unconventional and flexible, with the ability to lean towards the feminine and the masculine at the same time. They draw admiration because they dare to be different. Dandies dress subtly, for flamboyance is not in their nature. They do not seek attention, rather they draw people towards them effortlessly. They are also impudent, and do not care what other people think. The key characteristic of the dandy is their ambiguity. Dangers. Most dandies get hatred from people of the same sex. A feminine dandy would sometimes get taunted by other men for being perverse, which is why they often try so hard to prove their masculinity, making them look more pathetic in the process. The key is to fully embrace this trait, regardless of what others think. Another characteristic they need to be conscious about is their impudence and audacity. They must learn to be careful with their words, and be conscious on whether a joke they would like to say is amusing or offensive. The natural. The natural seducers are the people who have subtly preserved their childlike qualities in order to attract others. Psychological traits of the natural. Children are naturally charming. Their smiles, the innocent expression in their eyes, and the awestruck expression they get when they see something new make them irresistible. This is why almost everyone melts at the sight of them. This naturalness is what seducers use to draw others towards them. There are different types of adult natural seducers, and sometimes they use a blend of childlike traits. There is the innocent, the imp, the wonder, and the undefensive lover. Dangers. Just like children, natural seducers can sometimes be irritating. Since the world is not very receptive towards these types of seducers, using this style is mostly only beneficial in certain situations. The coquette. The coquette seducer is skilled in alternating between giving and taking, artfully delaying satisfaction. The hot and cold coquette. The hot and cold coquette alternate between being affectionate and cold. They lure the object of their desire by being warm and loving, and then suddenly become cold and angry the next. This can severely confuse their target. But just at the brink of surrender, the coquette will draw them back by indulging their target the pleasure they desire. The cold coquette. The cold coquette is reserved, withdrawn, and aloof, and these are the very qualities that attract other people to them. Cold coquettes hold themselves back, never revealing who they truly are. The enigma and the detachment are enough to make others desire to want to know the person underneath the calm, cool exterior. Keys to the character. What sets coquettes apart is their ability to hook their targets emotionally and then leave them wanting. Most of their targets eventually realize the manipulation, but they are spellbound nonetheless. Coquettes understand that too much closeness can be suffocating, hence they maintain their distance. The key is to withdraw emotionally, and this will make their targets desire them more. The coquette is also narcissistic and independent. Coquettes have almost always been the female, and were known to withhold sexual favors from men. However, later, men also adopted this seduction style. The key to attracting their target is subtle temptation. Wearing provocative clothes is not the way to go, as it is too obvious. The coquette does not indulge in jealousy, rather incites it from other people. Dangers. Since coquettes incite extreme emotions in people as they alternate between hot and cold, the danger is unnecessarily prolonging the emotion. The targets can grow tired of the manipulation and may decide to move on. The cold coquette, on the other hand, can incite hatred from other people. Their extreme detachment can frustrate their targets and eventually despise them. The charmer. The charmer's seduction style is to manipulate. They immerse themselves on their target, focusing all their attention on them. They learn about their target's moods and wants and uplift their spirit until the targets become dependent on them. The art of charm. Charmers captivate by aiming at the things that people usually have no control over, such as their ego, vanity, and self-esteem. They can seduce on a mass level. Charmers work by making their targets the center of attention. They put all their focus on the people they desire, learning about their strengths and weaknesses. As such, they tailor-fit their attention to their target's needs. After that, they distract their targets from their problems by being a source of pleasure. The charmers also never involve themselves in conflict. They withdraw and take a diplomatic approach when disagreements arise. Next, they provide a sense of security and comfort. They adapt to their target's moods, making them lower their defenses. Charmers are also calm in the face of chaos. Calmness helps ease people's worries, and they therefore get drawn to them. Finally, charmers are doers. They show gratitude when necessary and follow through on their promises. Dangers. Charmers have enemies, such as cynics and confident people, because they do not need validation to feel better about themselves. Timing is everything when charming a target, and the key is to know when to withdraw or pursue. The charismatic. Charismatic seducers exude confidence, power, and charm, which can be expressed through an intense gaze or a grand oratory. Charisma and seduction. Charismatic people can attract people on a grand scale. Their natural power, air of mystery, and the conviction with which they speak can move many people. These are the people who walk in a room and catch people's attention naturally. That commanding presence and air of mystery can easily pique people's interest. Charismatics have a vision or a sense of purpose, a hint of saintliness, a bit of an enigma, and are eloquent when they speak. They also possess passion, spontaneity, and a bit of vulnerability. Dangers. Charismatics stir volatile emotions and, therefore, can cause fatigue in their targets. It is also difficult to incite of passion from people, and once people see through the speech, the dramatics, and the man himself, then the seduction fails. One should master their charisma to ensure that it is kept under control at all times. The star. Stars are elusive seducers and feed on people's weaknesses. They are appealing but vague, and this combination is what attracts people to them. The fetishistic star. Fetishistic seducers have the ability to see themselves as objects and, as such, are able to further enhance themselves. They can use their body, their gestures, and their voice as an instrument to draw people's attention. They accept it as it is, and this non-committal mentality is what sets them apart. They create an image of themselves and uphold the image that is well loved by people. The mythic star. The mythic star embodies a mythic being, coming out as the hero in untimely situations. They draw people towards them by striking a common chord, like fear and hope, giving the impression that they are just like everyone else. However, they are also detached, which also makes them mysterious. Keys to the character. Stars stir curiosity by showing glimpses of their lives, enough to trigger a fantasy. They also know how to sympathize with people and can make it seem that they share others' pain and joy. Dangers. The problem stars often encounter is waning admiration from people. Sometimes the image they create is not enough to hold people's attention, and soon they focus on other stars. Stars should never obsess with the image they create, rather approach it with light-heartedness. The anti-seducer. Typology of the anti-seducers. Anti-seducers are fundamentally insecure, and this insecurity makes it difficult for anyone to seduce them. Anti-seductive qualities can be difficult to identify at first, but they will eventually show. People who would like to try seducing others must also be able to weed out any anti-seductive qualities in themselves. There are many types of anti-seducers. There is the brute, who is impatient and egotistic, and only cares for their own pleasures. Next is the suffocator, who falls deeply in love and centers their attention on the object of their desire. They tend to agree with everything they are told, as they are desperate for love and affection. The moralizer is rigid and seeks to change and dominate people. The tightwads are not only cheap, but are unable to take risks or make decisions. The bumbler is self-conscious and self-absorbed, hence they do not think of anyone but themselves. The windbag is selfish and likes to flatter their own vanity, while the reactors are whiners and complainers, who misinterpret people's words and actions. Lastly, the vulgarians are those who gossip a lot and are very impulsive. Uses of anti-seduction. The best anti-seducing technique is to be detached, inattentive, and indifferent. This is what Octavius did when he was in Cleopatra's presence, so he wouldn't fall for her charms. It is important to identify the different victims of seduction. These victims are characterized by what is missing in their lives: love, adventure, happiness, etc. Once the missing piece is identified, a seducer can provide that missing piece, and the seduction process begins. Everyone has something missing in their lives, and if one wishes to seduce someone else, they should never choose a target seeking the same thing as they are. The seductive process. The seductive process takes conscious effort and practice. It takes time and patience, and one must always ensure to be one step ahead of their victims. There are 4 phases to the seductive process, each one outlining in detail what steps to take and what to avoid. Phase 1. Separation, stirring interest and desire. Once a person has a target, the first thing to do is separate them for people to allow the seducer to get through. Once the victim is hooked, it is time to turn their interest to desire. Choosing the right victim. Choosing the victim is the foundation on which the seduction process begins. The victim should have something missing in their life that the seducer knows they can fill. The victim should also be attractive, not necessarily pretty or handsome, but possess a quality that draws the seducer to them. It may be a quality that the seducer lacks or wishes to have. The victim should also show a little resistance or reluctance to interact, as this makes the seduction process more enjoyable. Keys to seduction. The right victim will unconsciously show a vulnerable side to themselves, and the way to recognize one is by observing how they react towards the seducer. The right victim's response will always be subtle. A blush, a shy smile, or even quiet resentment are signs that the victim is susceptible to the seducer's charms. The right targets also incite feelings of desire from the seducer. This attraction is necessary as it makes the seducer more engaged and the seduction more enjoyable. Introverts also make better victims than extroverts, as these people yearn to be drawn out. Seducers should turn away from people who openly show a liking for them. The thrill of the hunt is how difficult it is to catch the prey. They should also avoid people absorbed in their career, as seduction takes time, as well as people who are happy and content with their lives. Reversal. There is no gain that a seducer can get from trying to seduce a person emotionally closed off, or who does not offer any thrill to the seduction process. Create a false sense of security. Approach indirectly. The key is to not be too overt with one's intention. The seducer must make it appear that meetings with their targets are coincidental rather than intentional. Friend to lover. Offering friendship to the victim is one effective way to learn more about them. A friendship is innocent, therefore will be viewed harmless by the victim. Friendship allows the seducer to gain the trust of their target, and in turn will make them comfortable. It connects them on a mental and emotional level. Once the victim becomes accustomed to the seducer, they will begin to yearn for a deeper connection until they make a move to do so. The victim is then led into thinking they are the seducer in this case. Keys to seduction. It is always wise to let the victim approach first. The seducer should give enough space, but at the same time remain visible to their victims at all times. Engaging in small talk or getting to know mutual friends or acquaintances is also helpful, as it makes the seducer get noticed, but in a harmless, platonic way. Reversal. Swooping in for the kill before the seducer's target can react have also proven to be effective in seduction, just like what Cleopatra and Casanova often did. However, while taking an indirect approach may only allow for a few conquests, it can be compensated by the quality of them. Send mixed signals. Sending mixed signals can lure a victim more effectively than being direct with one's intention. Good and bad. The seductive process entails that the seducer must not reveal all their cards. That is, once a seducer has the victim's attention, he or she must only show glimpses of what else is underneath to pique the victim's curiosity. A beautiful or handsome face can only attract for a short while, but hints of something more complex underneath the exterior can be beguiling to the victims. Artificial and natural. There is nothing more appealing and intriguing than a person who is a paradox, and this is what seducers need to master. Such an example was Oscar Wilde, a large man who dressed effeminately that people treated him with disdain at first sight. But when he spoke, they were enraptured. Despite the jokes people made against him, he reacted nonchalantly. This contrast between the man and his character made him loved by many and piqued people's interest and curiosity, making them want to know more about the man. Keys to seduction. It is important that from the very start that the seducer creates the illusion that there is something more to them than meets the eye. Sending mixed signals can cause confusion, but can make it appear to add more depth to the seducer's character. The key is to appear enigmatic, and the seducer will have a more permanent hold on their victim's attention. Reversal. The effort with which the seducer creates the illusion of depth and complexity is dependent on the target and their response to it. If the illusion does not move them, then perhaps the victim may not be the right one for the seducer. Appear to be an object of desire. Create triangles. The seducer must also be well skilled in creating an illusion of desirability. To do this, one must appear wanted by many, and nothing creates this illusion better than surrounding one's self with people of the opposite sex. Creating triangles. To incite jealousy and feeling of possessiveness, the seducer must make it appear that he or she is wanted by many. By creating a triangle to which the seducer introduces characters who obviously desire them, will subtly make the target desire the seducer as well. They will begin to fall all over themselves to compete for the seducer's love and attention. Keys to seduction. Seducers should always make it a point to be in the company of their admirers. This creates a sense of rivalry, and soon people will compete for the seducer's attention, including that of the victim. Most importantly, a seducer must remain aloof and unattainable. Create a need, stir anxiety and discontent. A seducer knows that the right target will have a void, one which they yearn to fill. It can be love, happiness, adventure that is missing from their lives, and this makes them susceptible to seduction. Seducers need to make their target realize what is missing from them, so they can convince them that they can be the one to fill it. Opening a wound. Everyone has insecurities or has been through an ordeal that caused them pain and despair. A seducer must be able to draw out their victim's insecurities, which will lead them to question their self-worth, and thus will draw them to the seducer, for they will begin to seek validation. The seducer must be able to convince their victims that they are lacking, but should be done in a subtle, indirect manner. Keys to seduction. A seducer must study their victims to determine what their strengths and weaknesses are. From there, he or she must be able to skillfully make the victim appear inadequate. This can be done through criticisms or by comparing them with people who appear more accomplished, more beautiful than they are. The seducer can use their victim's past and exalt their accomplishments in youth, so they feel dissatisfied and insecure about their age. Once the target becomes unsettled, the seducer will then redefine their victim's identity, and thus they become hooked. Reversal. Stirring anxiety and contentment can be tricky, and a seducer must know when to press forward or hold back. Too much insecurity can cause the seduction to fail. Hence, this must be done carefully. Master the art of insinuation. Dropping hints can be very powerful, as it allows the seducer to plant ideas in their target's minds without being too obvious. Insinuating desire. Insinuation allows the seducer to lead the target into doing what they want, but making it appear that it was the target's idea all along. Instilling doubt will disorient the victim, making them insecure or angry, making them vulnerable to the seducer. Slight physical contact that looks accidental or a warm, suggestive look can make the victim begin to fantasize about the seducer. All these will make the target succumb to the seducer's charms without them even noticing it. Keys to seduction. Insinuation aims to break down the target's defenses by picking away at their insecurities. Once the seed of doubt is planted, it will blossom, and the target will brood over it. Interestingly, the target will feel as though this thinking was initiated by them, and, hence, is prompted to make the first move. To insinuate, a seducer must be vague. A hint here and there is enough to engage the target's imagination. Accidental slips followed by an apology are also effective in arousing the target's interest. Words are not the only way to insinuate ideas. A piercing look or a gesture can sometimes have the same effect. Reversal. Insinuations can easily be misinterpreted, which is why it is important that this method be used wisely. This is more effective for victims who are mistrustful by nature. Direct attacks would only raise their suspicions, which is why an indirect route would be the wisest choice. Enter their spirit. A seducer must be able to adapt to the moods of their targets, to allow them to open up and allow them into their spirits. The indulgent strategy. Indulging your target is a subtle but effective form of seduction. It makes the victim perceive the seducer as non-threatening, causing them to lower their defenses. Indulging them means following their every whim, even when they are unreasonable, without displaying any anger or resentment. This allows the target to feel dominant, and soon they will begin to feel intoxicated with the attention the seducer is lavishing them, boosting their ego and flattering their vanity at the same time. Once unguarded, the target becomes open to the seducer's influence. Keys to seduction. Everyone is narcissistic by nature, just at different levels. In youth, people obsess over their physical appearance, but in adulthood, their narcissism shifts into something more psychological, tastes, likes, and hobbies, among others. To see someone mirroring one's tastes and moods is flattering because it validates them. Thus, they grow comfortable. Entering a target's spirit is similar to hypnosis and is one of the most effective tools of persuasion. Reversal. Seducers must be careful not to linger too long in their target's spirits. Mirroring can get old if overly done, and will make the target see through them, breaking the seduction process altogether. Create temptation. The tantalizing object. Temptation is a twofold process. One is to be flirtatious, making the target desire for the seducer, and the second to create the illusion that he or she is unattainable. Barriers create a challenge and give thrill to the chase. Creating such a conflict will make the target yearn for the seducer and will prompt them to go to any lengths to have them. Keys to seduction. A seducer's temptation must be aimed at the target's weakness and must be immensely appealing to them, so much so that they overcome the barriers to get it. The second step is to create a barrier so the temptation being offered is not deemed superficial. The more forbidden the temptation is perceived, the more it whets the seducer's appetite. Reversal. There is no reversal to temptation. Either the target is lured or not. Temptations must be planned carefully, as they should accurately target the weakness of the victim. Phase 2. Led astray. creating pleasure and confusion. By this time, the target is already captivated, and in order to lure them further, the seducer must now put them in suspense. Keep them in suspense. What comes next? A seducer should always be one step ahead of their target. If the seducer begins to behave predictably, he or she can lose the upper hand in the seduction process. The calculated surprise. In seduction, mystery is what keeps the targets interested. The desire to get to know their seducer better gnaws at them. To throw them off and keep them on their toes, a seducer must constantly come up with surprises to keep them curious. People often judge immediately based on physical appearance or a few gestures. To break the first impression, the seducer can show different sides of him or herself, keeping the target looking forward to what will come next. Keys to seduction. Surprises, especially pleasant ones, can instantly break people's defenses because of a wave of emotion suddenly floods them at that moment. It also helps to conceal a seducer's motive because the target is too overwhelmed by the surprise to think clearly. Carefully planned surprises are also non-selfish and convey a message to the target that the seducer is thinking of them. Reversal. Planning surprises means thinking of new ways to create similar reactions from the target. It must be something unexpected, amusing, and creative. Use the demonic power of words to sow confusion. People sometimes get so absorbed in their desires that they make little time to listen to others. A seducer must be able to speak the seductive language by saying the very things that the target wants to hear. Seductive oratory. In seduction, before one speaks, it is important to first ask oneself what their target would find pleasant to listen to. Is it flattery? Comfort? Hope? By studying the target, a seducer can understand the insecurities they harbor and use that knowledge to captivate them. People's defenses usually come down once they hear what they wish to hear. Seductive writing. Seductive writing can be a disarming tool in seduction when done correctly. Men usually think that persistence and overt affection proves his love, but for women it may display his impatience and insecurity. A woman's interest is piqued by men who show no interest to them, which is why a correspondence must not be sent until after a target has had an impression of him. The letters will hint of something more about his character, and the woman's imagination will run rampant, guessing at what the seducer is really like. She will begin to idealize him, and before she realizes it, she is captivated. If a target has fallen into his spell, their responses will begin to sound similar to that of the seducers. Keys to seduction. To use the seductive language effectively, a seducer must refrain from being like others, saying the first thing that comes to mind. Words are a powerful tool because they can move people into action, and they can arouse emotions such as desire, love, or hope. To seduce, one's words must be carefully chosen, so they sound pleasant to the target's ears. Flattery is one of the most effective means to get under a target's skin. It plays on their ego, boosting it. If used properly, the seducer will get the target's undivided attention. Reversal. Excess verbal flattery can be a turnoff, which is why a seducer must be careful in selecting their words. They should also approach their targets first with platonic conversation, so it won't arouse any suspicion. Once the target is engaged, that's when the seducer should enter the second phase and use the seductive language. Pay attention to detail. People say that the smallest things make the biggest difference, and this is also true with seduction. Grand gestures can seem pretentious and may not have much effect on a target. However, by paying attention to the target and getting to know what they like, the seducer can give small, thoughtful gifts instead. These gifts also convey a message that the seducer has paid attention to the target, which can stir feelings of appreciation and affection in them. The mesmerizing effect. In seduction, one way to mesmerize a target is to overwhelm their senses with details, objects, and color. A little spectacle, charming theatrics, and small, thoughtful gifts are enough to enchant them. Appealing to a target's senses can be distracting, allowing the seducer to manipulate without being noticed. The sensuous effect. The sensuous effect also plays at the senses of the target, but this time the aim is to lull them into a state of relaxation and comfort. This can be done by creating an illusion of tranquility, dimmed lights, perfumed candles, intimate, platonic conversations can make the target lower their defenses, allowing the seducer to draw them even closer to him. Keys to seduction. Thorough observance and patience is needed for a seducer to orchestrate the mesmerizing or sensuous effect. A seducer must be able to dress themselves in a manner that will appeal to their target and should give gifts tailored to the target's desires. Most importantly, the seducer must be able to use the right words to further lure their target into their arms. Reversal. There is no reversal, for attention to details is necessary for a successful seduction. Poeticize your presence. A seducer must not only make his presence felt, but also his absence. This can be done by keeping the target at an arm's length, near enough to touch, but also far enough to appear unattainable. Poetic presence and absence. Once a target knows all about their seducer, the attraction and interest fades. Spending too much time with a person can eventually make the target see through the seducer, which is why it is important that a seducer knows when to withdraw. The seducer must keep him or herself a mystery to sustain the target's interest in them. At the same time, a seducer must also not be gone too long, for their target's interest will wander. Keys to seduction. People often like to perceive themselves as something greater than they are, and they apply the same principle when looking for a partner. After all, their partner is a reflection of who they are as well. Using this knowledge, seducers should know how to maintain the idealism that their targets have of them. They must not allow their targets to see how human they are, with limitations and weaknesses. This is why it is important to keep a distance from time to time. Also, if the target perceives a seducer idealistically, then the seducer must return the favor and exalt their target's strengths or physical beauty. Reversal. Idealism or poeticization is necessary for the seduction process, and the seducer must avoid being perceived as mediocre. While there is something refreshing about honesty and admission to being human, revealing this too early in the process will not be beneficial to both the seducer and the target. Disarm through strategic weakness and vulnerability. Nothing can be more intoxicating than the feeling of being the dominant one. A seducer can make themselves appear weak to their targets to avoid suspicion. The victim strategy. Sometimes it is necessary for the seducer to appear weak and play the victim to avoid resistance or rousing the suspicion of his target. Numerous seducers have resorted to using this strategy to cover their deceitful acts. By making it look like the seducer is unable to control themselves, even admitting guilt and weakness, they can stir sympathy and tender emotions from the victim. Keys to seduction. Showing weaknesses can be beneficial because it allows the target to view the seducer as human, allowing for a deeper bond to form between them. A man may fear using this strategy because his sense of masculinity discourages him from appearing weak in front of women. However, seductresses know this internal conflict in men, and they downplay their power by playing the fragile girl act to boost their target's masculinity. A few tears, sparingly used at the right moment, are also effective in making the seducer appear vulnerable. Reversal. A seducer must be careful not to overplay the victim's strategy, because their target may be turned off by the excessive emotional outbursts. The seducer must carefully choose how to play this part because the objective is to appear lovable, not pathetic. Confused desire and reality. The perfect illusion. Everyone has fantasies and dreams of the things they want in life. A seducer must be able to know what their target's desire is and convince them that they can fulfill it. Fantasy in the flesh. Although it may take a lot of work and effort, creating a fantasy tailored to a target's desire can be very effective. To set the gears in motion, a seducer must first plant the idea of the fantasy in their target's mind. The key is to be convincing, and the seducer must now build the story, weaving the fantasy seamlessly with reality, until the target no longer knows the difference. This must be accompanied by visuals as well. Some theatrics and fictional characters will make the fantasy appear real. Fantasy in the flesh entails that the seducer embody the fantasy. They must become the person that their targets wish for. Wild fulfillment. The wild fulfillment is akin to the seducer brandishing a magic wand and making their target's dream come true, or at least something close to it. If successful, not only will the seducer have fulfilled the target's dream, he will have captured their heart as well. Keys to seduction. It is important for the seducer to choose a target with an unrealized dream or repressed fantasy to create the perfect illusion. The seducer must also be patient and lead their target slowly, giving only glimpses of the illusion at first, then gradually heightening the drama. Role-playing can also be an effective tool, as it allows the target to realize their desires through the seducer, deepening their attachment to him. Isolate the victim. Separating the target from friends and family can set the perfect ground to further seduce them. Once a person has no support system, they can easily be led astray. Isolation, the exotic effect. Sometimes a seducer may find it difficult to get their target's attention because they are in the company of others. This is a hindrance to the seduction process. Therefore, the best way to lure them from others is by introducing something unfamiliar and irresistible. Once the seducer has pried them away from the crowd, they must be able to sustain their interest by disorienting the target with different moods, hot and cold, attachment and detachment, and the target will grow emotional and dependent on the seducer. Isolation, the only you effect. People are flattered when lavished with attention, but to be the center of attention when there are other more beautiful women or handsome men around is thrilling. The only you effect allows the target to bask in the admiration of the seducer, unbeknownst to them that by doing so, the seducer is actually separating them from everyone else. Keys to seduction. Targets can be rock solid, and a seducer can find it difficult to penetrate their tough exterior. However, isolating that target from everything and everyone they know can break down those barriers, allowing the seducer to break through the target's resistance. In isolating a target, the seducer must make them feel a hint of danger. A sense of adventure and excitement will distract them from knowing the seducer's true intentions. And once they catch on, there would be no one left but the seducer to comfort them. Reversal. Isolating the victim requires perfect timing because whisking them away too soon will only cause panic, and the spell will be broken. The seducer must make the target feel pleasure in leaving everything and everyone behind. However, once past this stage, the seducer must also make it a point to create a new world for him or her and their target. Phase 3. The precipice, deepening the effect through extreme measures. It is now time to further lure the target and take them deeper into seduction. At this point, the actions must be elevated, aimed to touch the target spiritually. Prove yourself. At one point, the seducer must be able to prove themselves by doing an act of self-sacrifice. Such an act can effectively overwhelm the target and convince them that the seducer's intentions are true. Seductive evidence. To back up words and promises, a seducer must be willing to do a selfless act to be deemed true to his word. Resistance from a target is normal in the seduction process, but it only means that they are engaged. Seducers often fail because they give up too easily. A seducer must be prepared to go the extra mile. If the target suddenly needs help or a favor, the seducer must spring into action and do more than necessary to prove themselves. Another way is by orchestrating danger and leading the target into it, and once the target is vulnerable, the seducer will appear and rescue them, becoming a savior in their eyes. Making the deed look chivalrous and dashing will arouse admiration from the target. Reversal. A seducer trying to prove their worth must know their target well. If they will not be impressed by display of physical strength, then the seducer must learn what else can sway them. Perhaps an act with a more poetic feel will prove more effective. Effect a regression. Most people's happiest memories are of when they were young, carefree, and immensely loved and protected by their parents and siblings. Reenacting such scenarios or something akin to it with a target can help rouse the bliss they felt back then and associate the happiness with the seducer. The erotic regression. When people recall memories of their childhood, often what is narrated are only the happy parts, never the ones about pain, because these memories are overshadowed by the carefree joy people felt back then. The joy is accompanied by a sense of dependence, when people's parents were still there to protect them from harm. The emotional attachment is strong between child and parent, charged with sexual undertones. The seducer's objective is to transfer that attachment to him. How is this done? The seducer must encourage the target to talk about their childhood and describe the relationship with their parents or siblings, identifying which of them had the most influence on the target. Was it their mother's unconditional love, or the parental love tinged with discipline? The seducer must then rouse the same feelings from his target by embodying the parent their target was most attached to. Reversal. A seducer must be prepared for rebellion if he decides to elicit the same emotions from his target. This is similar to how a child would sometimes behave with their parents when they do not get their way. And unlike parents, the seducer must never take this rebellious outburst personally. Stir up the transgressive and taboo. Society dictates what people ought to do, limiting their ability to explore and limiting their exposure to something more exciting. A seducer must show their target that they are willing to go past the limits of what social convention dictates, which will certainly excite them. The lost self. Lure of the forbidden is a tantalizing prospect, and it can arouse a person's desire to be adventurous and take risks. As such, when people meet others with a rebellious streak in their nature, they are drawn to them, envious that they could act with such wild abandon. A seducer must be able to entice their target to engage in small, rebellious acts, and then encourage them to take bigger risks. The danger of it all will make them giddy with excitement, and they will try to recapture that feeling. Who else would they turn to get that kick? The seducer, of course. Keys to seduction. People usually conceal their desires because sometimes they are deemed unacceptable in society. As such, they bury it deep within themselves. A seducer must be able to draw out these desires and encourage their targets to take the risk. How can this be done? First, a seducer must create the illusion that he or she is forbidden by playing up their dark side. Once the target is engaged, the seducer must then make the target feel that they are engaged in a crime, a secret that only the two of them share. This will create a bond between the seducer and the victim. Reversal. Staying within the conventional laws of society is the opposite of transgression. However, acceptable behavior is predictable and boring. Two qualities that can break the seduction process. In seduction, the seducer must be willing to take risks, or even break a few laws. Use spiritual lures. People sometimes get a tendency to focus on their insecurities or become self-conscious of their flaws. A seducer must be able to elevate their relationship with their target past the physical into something more spiritual. Object of worship. A seducer must understand that focusing on the physical attributes of their target can be a burden to their victim. They will feel obliged to look their best to not disappoint. By letting your victim know that you see their beauty beyond the physical is refreshing. And to add more depth to this claim, the seducer must engage their target into something spiritual, a religion, a cult, even art. Focusing on the beauty of something higher will bring them peace and happiness, which they will then associate with the seducer. Keys to seduction. In seduction, it is normal for any person to feel that they are being pursued only for their physical appearance. However, by engaging a target into religion, the seducer successfully touches their soul, creating a lasting, deeper connection. Reversal. One of the dangers that spiritual lures create is that it can be prone to misinterpretation. It can cause anxiety in the target, who may feel like the seducer's actions is leading into marriage or something else that requires commitment, which they may not be ready for. The seducer must make it clear that such a thing is not their intention. Mix pleasure with pain. Too much kindness can get boring, which is why a seducer must steer away from being too kind. A little bit of cruelty can make the seduction process interesting. The emotional roller coaster. Seducers can apply the hot and cold method in the seduction process, alternating between being kind, sweet, and charming to being hard, cold, and cruel. Some targets find this addicting. The unpredictable behavior and displays of extreme emotions can disorient them, but after the torment, they know that pleasure will follow next. The target's feeling of happiness is doubled once this phase comes, because the suffering that came previously has made them appreciate the small glimpses of charm that their seducer offers them. Harshness and kindness. There are people who find it difficult to open up emotionally, and this resistance is fatal to the seduction process. Flattery and kindness may help break down these defenses, but this approach is weak and may take a long time before it yields results. A quicker method would be the application of harshness and kindness. Here, the seducer cruelly criticizes their target and then softens their tone, drawing out their insecurities. This approach makes the target angry and, at the same time, makes them desire to defend themselves. Thus, they reveal their emotions. Keys to seduction. People crave emotions, whether they be good or bad. Being nice all the time may be effective at first, but will soon wear out a target. Negative emotions actually make the seduction process more alluring. Inciting jealousy, for example, may make the target feel insecure, But the reward and accomplishment they feel later on, once the seducer chooses them over someone else, is doubly satisfying. For people to appreciate peace, there must be chaos first. For people to appreciate kindness, there must be suffering beforehand. Reversal. Seducers must rein their harshness if their target is a person who has been subjected to cruelty for most of their life. For these kinds of people, the best approach would be to provide more pleasure than pain. Timing is everything when using this technique because it may scare the target off before the seduction even begins. Phase 4. Moving in for the kill. At this stage, the seducer and target have already gone through mental seduction, emotional and spiritual seduction, and the fourth phase is about physical seduction. The targets, by this time, would be dependent on the seducer's presence, hence, it is time to seal the deal. Give them space to fall. The pursuer is pursued. The seducer, most of the time, is the initiator of all actions. In this case, it is time for him to step back and allow the target to make the move this time. Seductive gravity. If the seducer does all the pursuing, then it will make the target get used to being passive. To break this, the seducer must pursue only to the point where the target is fully engaged and feels desire for them, and at the height of their interest, they must withdraw. This sudden detachment will stir anxiety in the target, who will begin to wonder why the target has distanced themselves away. The anxiety will grow, and the target will then be overcome with an intense desire to possess the seducer. Hence, they will make the move to do so. Keys to seduction. The seducer must wait for the perfect time to execute their retreat, and they must do this subtly. While a similar action has been done previously, this time the context is different. The target is now in love with the seducer. As such, withdrawal will make the victim wonder what they have done to repel you. They will be overwhelmed with panic, which will prompt them to do the pursuing. Reversal. Absence should only be done when a seducer is sure about his target's feelings. Retreating can backfire if done too early, and may cause the target to either lose interest or seek affections somewhere else. Use physical lures. Active minds are dangerous, for they may be able to see through manipulations. The seducer must be able to come up with a way to distract their targets from thinking, and by doing so, they must appeal to their dormant senses. Raising the temperature. To lure a target, a seducer must be able to inflame their body with heat for the victim. The seducer must make it subtle, and they must be able to hold back so their target will feel the pent-up sexual energy radiating from them. The aim is to frustrate the target into making the first move. The seducer must tease, tantalize until their heat warms the target, until them, too, are inflamed with desire. Lowering inhibitions. Society and years of education are the enemies of this seduction style, because they make people resist. However, the secret to making the target lower their inhibition is to display a disregard for rules and all other things that convention has prohibited. The streak of wildness mingled with an intense gaze and fleeting touches will convey the message that you desire the target, which will make them return the seducer's caresses and attention with the same vigor. Keys to seduction. The seducer must spend more time with the victim to execute the physical lure, and, in doing so, should make them revel in the present. Every gesture and every action should be radiating their desire for the target. It is also important that one's ensemble be alluring as well. A tousled look, a relaxed way of dressing, some perfume and confidence can help captivate the target. A seducer must be able to allow the target to bask in their sexual energy, for the target to feel the heat emanating from their body for wanting to be with them. Slips of the tongue, stuttering, and breathlessness are signs that the target is affected, and this is where the seducer takes the seduction a notch higher. Reversal. A seducer must be able to convince their target that the union is more than physical, but emotional and spiritual as well. Seduction based purely on the physical aspect can easily frighten people away. Master the art of bold move. At this stage, the seducer should shed chivalry and kindness aside and swoop in with a bold move to seal the deal. The perfect climax. The perfect climax is one in which the seducer has taken their time to lure their target, coaxing and teasing, but then holding back. Once the target is wild with desire, they retreat momentarily, prolonging their agony. Then, at the right moment, they plunge in, giving no time for the target to react. This style has a double effect: physical surrender and a boost to their ego and vanity. Keys to seduction. Bold, confident actions are what are needed in the seduction process. Such traits will convey the message that the seducer has lost control, and therefore the seducer must follow suit. It allows for barriers to be broken. The bold move must catch the target off guard, so it will heighten their desire and tension, and later long for release. Successful female seductresses made the first move, initiating a kiss or a touch, sending their male targets aflame with excitement and desire. Beware the after effects. After the seduction, it is normal to find the desire waning and insecurity creeping in. If another seduction is needed, the seducer must redo the process, but taking a different approach this time. If the relationship between the seducer and target continues, one must keep in mind that familiarity can spoil the fantasy. If the relationship is to end, it is better to do so quickly. Disenchantment. Once all the pent-up yearning, desire, and attraction are released, so will the enchantment. Both the seducer and target may feel the effects wear off and reality creep in. One must be prepared for disappointment, for the illusion is now broken. At this point, severing ties may rekindle the spell, or a second seduction may be needed. If the target realizes the manipulation, the seducer may want to prove themselves over again by lavishing them with attention, luring them and distancing themselves from time to time to recreate the air of mystery. At this stage, physical appearance is no longer important and will not hold the target's interest. It is with technique and strategy that a seducer can prolong the seduction. The seducer must also remember to keep the interaction light. Anything too serious will allow for annoying habits, such as nagging and complaining, to settle in. By keeping things lighthearted and playful, the seducer can maintain control. Finally, if the fire within the seducer has died out, it is better to end things swiftly with the target. Reversal. Reseduction is necessary if a seducer wishes to keep their target enchanted. It is all right for the seducer to show a little more of themselves, for detachment can sometimes breed mistrust. Even if familiarity creeps in, the important thing is to surprise them every now and then. This allows the target to feel that they are getting to know more about you. Seductive environment, seductive time. In older times, many people looked forward to festivals because these glorious occasions provided relief from the monotony of their daily lives. It provided a much-needed break from their routine. These festivals allowed them to dress up and be who they wanted to be. For a moment, they could pretend to be someone else and revel in this totally new persona. The lure of the seduction process is as intoxicating as the release that people feel during these festivals. In seduction, the target feels liberated because the seducer coaxes them out of their usual habits and dares them to take risks and break the rules of social convention. Therefore, when they go back to their daily routine, they will begin to crave that feeling of freedom and thrill that the seducer offers, and before they know it, they will begin to yearn for it. To recreate the same feel and look, a seducer can create theatrics and other images to overwhelm the senses, play with how intimate the seduction can be, and encourage the target to immerse in the moment. Soft seduction. How to sell anything to the masses. The soft sell. While seduction is usually applied to a specific individual, it can actually be used on a grand scale. Historically, politicians have used the art of seduction to draw the masses to them. In order to do this, one of the most effective methods is the soft sell. It is an indirect approach to lure people. In hard sell, the seducer explicitly mentions what he or she can offer, quoting statistics and stating their achievements. The hard sell approach can grate nerves, arouse suspicion, and hatred from the masses, which is why it is never recommended. In soft sell, the seducer entertains and engages the audience's emotions and spirituality. It aims to play at the emotions of people, after which the seducer will subtly introduce themselves and then fade into the background. The key is to pay more attention on how to deliver the message than on the message itself. In soft sell, the seducer creates an impact, and it is the value of the message that lingers in people's minds, the value that they will now begin to associate with the seducer. The art of seduction imparts a lot of lessons on how to effectively seduce people. Robert Greene has not only created a guide, but has also ingeniously weaved in stories of some of the most prominent people in history who have used these seduction methods to persuade and lure people to them, giving a vivid example on how the techniques can be applied. Greene has generously provided tips and tricks on how to pull off a seduction, and how we can resist being seduced ourselves. Greene offers a lively story, with vivid and relevant descriptions of well-known personalities and their share of scandal and gossip, providing not only lessons but entertainment as well. The book begins by describing the different types of seducers and the methods they used to attract and captivate their targets. There are seducers who enthrall their victims through their physical appearance and sexuality. Men whose allure are in the streaks of wildness and rebelliousness in their eyes, while others adopted to the personality of their victims to gain their trust. The message that Greene kept repeating throughout the book is to create an air of mystery, never letting the target to see through beyond the illusion the seducer has created. To do this, the seducer needs to retreat from time to time. He also says that familiarity and over-eagerness should be avoided at all costs. The methods used were simple, but effective, and these seduction styles were used by the likes of Cleopatra, Marilyn Monroe, and Casanova. In the next part of the book, Greene takes us through the different types of victims, what their insecurities are, and provides a step-by-step on how to select the victim, play with their emotions, and seal the deal. Greene tells us that it is important to study the target, their habits, behaviors, dreams, and insecurities. The seducer can then use this knowledge to their advantage and will be the basis of the strategies they will need to come up with to seduce their victim. Greene also tells us that seduction can be used in social and political scenarios. In fact, Napoleon Bonaparte and John F. Kennedy were masters of seduction, and they used different methods of seduction to sway and lure people to their cause. By learning the different seduction styles, we learn that seduction is not just simply attracting and swooping in for the kill. It is similar to being a general in the army. It is not simply aiming a gun and shooting the enemy. It requires patience, time, skill, and most of all, technique. Finally, Greene ends the book with a warning about what usually happens after the fires of seduction has died. He says that at this stage, the victim and seducer become disenchanted as they realize that the object of their desires is only human, therefore flawed. However, the author tells us that we have 3 choices left at this point: to swiftly end the seduction, redo the process from the top, or continue with the seduction by remaining an enigma to your target.